I have Heidi Barr with me, and your testimony of what you saw in heaven and everything that the Lord has done is so supernatural and so amazing. And you're an author, and you have a nursing background, and you were a hospice nurse. But before we get to what happened to you in heaven, wanted you to share just your background.
I'm sort of the least likely person, not the least likely, but I'm one of the least likely people who would end up with Jesus. I grew up in Iowa, which is great, and I'll be a Hawkeyes fan till the day I die again. Um, but I grew up in an atheist family. My father was a hardcore atheist. He had no relationship with God. And yet, at the same time, we were part of an Orthodox community, which I loved. I loved being part of an Orthodox community. To this day, I still attend an Orthodox shul because that is really familiar to me. That's home to me. But at our home, we were only allowed to talk about God if we were denying his existence. At the same time, I always believed in God. I believed in God. I talked to God every night from the time I was a little kid. He's my first memory is talking to God. My life wasn't the easiest life. It wasn't the smoothest upbringing. It wasn't the healthiest of families. But I had kind of reached a point through various bad things that happened when I didn't talk to God anymore. I stopped talking to God when I was 12 years old. When I was 15, I went through a very traumatic year. And by the time I turned 16, I honestly didn't even want to be here anymore. The only thing that kept me going at that time was my horse. I have always loved horses, and I had a horse named Heather. I used to ride her all the time. I spent all my free time with her, winter, summer, spring, fall. I spent all my free time with my horse because there was nothing as freeing, nothing that took me out of my misery as much as riding my horse or just burying my face in my horse's neck or just being with my horse. So it's rather ironic that the thing I loved the most was the instrument of my very terrible accident. Um, One day I was at the ranch where we boarded her, and there was a confrontation in the barn between a husband and wife about who could ride the Arabian mare, and this Arabian mare was not very well behaved. So I just got my horse and hopped on her bareback because I did not own a saddle and headed out into the trails. And this was in April. This was towards the end of April, early May. And it's weird because I remember the time of day exactly that it happened, which is really weird and impossible. But I don't remember it. I just know it was end of April, early May. And the weather was gorgeous. There were just a few fluffy clouds in the sky. I took her out on the trails for about an hour, and I brought my sisters with me. So I was having a really good ride. And after an hour or so, I thought my sisters must be getting bored. I should take them home. And they like to come out to the ranch. So my mom had loaned me the car, and I had taken my sisters with me. So I started to ride back to the barn, which meant riding back along these trails. And I was the only one out there as far as I knew. And in order to get to the barn, you had to go down a hill, but there was an option. I could head off on a side trail, and it dead ended, and I could just sit there. And from that side trail, I had a view of the barn. I had a view of the trees, both directions, behind me, in front of me. And it was just a nice place to sit. I could see my sisters down below me. I could see the barn. The door to the barn faced away from me, but I could still see the barn and the paddock and the pasture. I could see Charlie's house. I could see the parking lot where I'd parked our car. And my middle sister was actually in the car because she's allergic to horses. My youngest sister was playing with the mini horses. There was a mare in her foal, and she loved going out there to play with those horses. So as I was sitting there and feeling calm, I heard hoofbeats, running hoofbeats. And I knew what this was. I knew this was a horse out of control. Every barn pretty much has the rule you don't run back to the barn. And I knew someone was running back to the barn, and I knew it was most likely, in fact, I knew it was the man who had taken out the Arabian mayor, and he was out of control. So as he came around the corner, I assumed the horse would head around the barn, head down the trail to the barn, which is what most horses do. He was holding on to the saddle horn for dear life. He dropped the reins, and I thought, she's going to flip, and they're both going to get injured or killed. But instead of going down the trail toward the barn, she turned and came directly towards me. And I didn't have a lot of time to react. I thought, okay, should I get off my horse? But I thought, well, if I get off my horse, I might get trampled. Because I had nowhere else to go. This was a dead end trail with a hill on either, with a slope on either side. So I thought, okay, when she sees my horse standing still, she'll stop, because a lot of horses will do that. When they see another horse, they'll stop. But she didn't. She kept coming towards us. I couldn't turn around and go towards her. I was really stuck at the end of this trail. She continued to run toward us at full speed. Heather's rump was facing her. Heather was kind of dancing around. I was trying to keep her under control. She kind of clipped Heather. She came right by her and then spun around. And when she did that, that horse spun around and headed back down the trail, or back towards the trail to the barn. Heather reared up. The first time she reared up, I dropped the reins and grabbed her mane. The second time she reared up, she stepped with her back feet off the trail and flipped over backwards. And I was still holding on to her mane. So I could see her body coming towards me as we fell down the hill, down the slope. And in that moment, I knew, as she approached my chest, I knew I was going to die. Every cell in my body knew I was going to die. The minute she hit my chest, I left my body. The very instant, I didn't feel her hit my chest. I just saw her back coming towards my chest. The instant she hit my chest, I left my body. I was 30, 40 feet up in the air, and I was looking down at everything that was happening. I saw Heather roll over my body, and my body was flipped like a rag doll. It was flipped to the right. And it reminded me of Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy. I was just flipped. Heather righted herself, slid down the hill, and ran to the barn. I looked further. I could see my little sister scream and cover her hands, or cover her face with her hands, cover her eyes with her hands. I could see my middle sister in the car staring out the window, looking absolutely horrified and shocked. And the weirdest thing was I could see into the barn, and I was facing, the barn door faced away from where I was, but it was as if the roof had disappeared. So I saw the Arabian mare with the rider on her back run into the barn, and there was chaos everywhere. People were scrambling to get out of the way. I saw my horse follow her and run into the barn. And again, it was extremely chaotic. And I saw Charlie realize, I could see his face as if I was up close and personal. Charlie was the ranch owner. And I saw him realize, oh, Heidi's not on Heather. Where is she? But the next thing I knew was, as I was looking at this, the one thought in my head was I had one thought in my head at that moment. And it was, I wish my sisters didn't have to see me die. That was the one thought. And when I thought that, I noticed this golden light flowing over my right shoulder, just flowing over my right shoulder. And it wasn't the sun. The sun was up there, and the sun wouldn't flow over my right shoulder. So I turned to look. I turned to my right to look, and there was a man up in the air with me. And I recognized him immediately. And as I recognized him, he moved forward until he was beside me. And I said, "Hi, I know you." I knew this was Jesus. How I knew, I don't know, but I knew in my heart, I knew completely that this was absolutely true. this was Jesus. And he didn't, pound on his chest and say, I'm Jesus and believe in me. Nothing. He was just there. And he had this big grin on his face. And I was so happy to see him because I realized I had known him my entire life. And we had the most right there above my body. That all became peripheral. I didn't care. I really didn't care. And I realized that he was my best friend, my father, my brother. He had been with me every day of my life. And when I had talked to God when I was a child, that was who I was talking to. Because I had always pictured him sitting at the head of my bed. That's how I saw him when I was a child. And when I had my life review, which I had right there, I saw him sitting by the head of my bed listening to me. So it was just this absolutely glorious reunion. I knew he was Jesus. I knew he was God. There was not a doubt in my mind. There was not a doubt in my soul. There was not a doubt in my body. I knew everything about him. So,
Now, growing up, since you were brought up Orthodox Jewish, I mean, did you ever hear anything about Jesus?
well, as I said, my family wasn't Orthodox. We belonged to an Orthodox synagogue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Jesus, yeah, my father would say, and I apologize. I know this is offensive. And later my father changed his mind, but my father would say,
And oh yeah, and we're going to get to that, and that's unbelievably supernatural. But keep on going.
my father would say often, Jesus Christ is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on mankind. He said that all the time. That was truly what he believed. He believed all anti Semitism stemmed from Jesus, which kind of didn't make sense to me. My grandmother had told me, my father's mother had told me, Jesus was Jewish. So I thought, how could anti Semitism stem from him? But was sort of, so I was aware. And we also lived in a community that was 99% Christian. So, yes, I was aware of Christianity. I was aware of Jesus. But to me, he was like, according to my father, it was as if Christians worshiped idols and Jesus was their biggest idol. So it was, in his mind, it was sort of idol worship and it was useless and there was no God, so it didn't really matter. So I didn't have any sort of concept of Jesus. I had a boyfriend at the time who was a born again Christian, and he was always trying to get me to become a Christian, and I didn't really understand it. And I couldn't, there was no way I could do that. That would have been too hard on my family. Every time I would think about it, I would think, yeah, but Jesus is a hoax. So I couldn't become a born again Christian. It just didn't resonate with me at that time. But when I met Jesus, I suddenly got it. I got who he was. And when I had my life review, which was right there above my body, and I saw my entire life, and I saw that he had been there, that he had formed me in my mother's womb, and he had been there every single day of my life. He had never left me. And he had just been waiting for me. And I kind of got the feeling he'd been waiting for me to turn around and look at him over my shoulder and acknowledge him and recognize him. And when I had my life review, it wasn't that he was judging or condemning me. He was with me, comforting me as I judged and condemned or criticized or was concerned about my own actions. And what I realized is everything I did, good or bad, neutral, impacted someone and impacted life here. So if I did something nice, something good, something kind, I could feel the kindness. I could feel what the other person, the recipient of my action, felt. So I was in two places at once. I was acting, but I was also the recipient of that act. I could feel both. If I did something cruel or not so nice, I could also feel that. And I realized I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And I was really upset because I could feel everything anyone I had hurt, and I was actually a pretty good kid, but anyone I hurt, I could feel their pain. And while I was upset and crying, Jesus was comforting me. He was comforting me through those moments. But after my life review, he took my hand and we left the scene of my accident. And I knew there was chaos and commotion on the ground. I didn't care. It just didn't matter to me anymore. I knew that was my body down there. I knew I was dead. It just didn't matter. That was immaterial to me. When we left, we were, I want to say flying, but we weren't exactly flying. We were surfing on a wave of light. It was rolling beneath our feet like an ocean wave, like if you body surf. We were body surfing on this wave of light. And I could see things initially. I could make out individual things, trees, houses, whatever, cities. But we left Earth, or that's the only way I can describe it. We left Earth and we were surfing through space. I could see the planets in the solar system, and I thought Saturn was really pretty. I could see, we eventually came to a galaxy, which I knew was the Andromeda Galaxy, and we stopped, and I was looking at this galaxy, this massive galaxy, and all I could think of was, this is what God sees when he wakes up in the morning. Now, and it was overwhelming. Now, I know God doesn't sleep, but that was the analogy that came to my mind, that this is the view God has of our universe. He can see it all. He created it all. He can see it all. And I was almost overcome by that knowledge of this, just this massive, infinite universe. But we kept going and we kind of went faster and faster. And I will say that the entire time we were traveling, we were talking and laughing and just gabbing. We never stopped talking. What we were talking about, I don't know. I can't remember. I just know we were laughed and talked and chatted the entire trip. And at last, we were going so fast that I no longer saw individual things. It was just everything kind of became one. Now, Jesus was there, I was there, but I realized everything was one thing, and that thing was God, in the sense that there is nowhere in this universe God is not. He was everywhere. And as we reached that point, I saw what I can only describe as a doorway or a threshold. And I crossed that threshold. Jesus held my hand. It's not exactly what it was, but it's the only description I have in English. We crossed this threshold. And after we crossed that threshold, we approached this beautiful, blemishless white light. It took up my entire field of vision. It was infinite in its scope. The light was alive. The light was love. And I knew this was God, God the Father. And we went directly into the light. Because Jesus, to me, Jesus was a person with me. He looked like a person. God was this beautiful white blemishless light. It was love. And the next thing I knew, I found myself sitting on God's lap. It's a really big God. And I was like a toddler sitting on his lap, sitting on her father's lap, kicking my feet. I was literally kicking I did have a body. I was kicking my feet and I had my arms around God. He had his arms around me. I buried my face against his chest. And I have never felt so accepted, so loved. I didn't want to leave. I would have stayed there for all eternity, just with my face buried in God's chest. I would have stayed there. I did try to see his face and I could not. I looked up. I did not see his face. It was shrouded with clouds, or I'm not quite sure, but I couldn't see his face. But at one point, God indicated, and how God communicates, it's not like he was speaking. Jesus and I were chatting. God was speaking a kind of different language. It was more in my heart. I could feel it, what he wanted, and he wanted to show me something. So I lifted my head, and you have to imagine a God who is infinite. This is infinite God. And yet it's as if, picture a really big God sitting on a really big throne with a robe of white light that extends infinitely in all directions. That's, I don't have words to describe it. Those are the only words I can use. So in order to show me what he wanted to show me, he had to remove a portion of himself. It was as if, imagine pulling back a very far distant corner of his white robe. And underneath that, I saw grass. That was the first thing I saw. And I saw the grass like it was right here, but it was infinitely far away. And I'm looking at this beautiful green grass. It was the essence of green. It was the heart of green. It was where all the green here comes from. And I could see every single blade of grass in this infinite meadow up close. It was amazing. I will always remember the grass. The grass will always stick with me. It was alive. I looked a little farther and I saw flowers, all different kinds of flowers. My eyes kept being drawn to these purple flowers that sort of resembled irises, but I could see every part of the flower, every vein and every petal of the flower. And I mean, I was really far away. I was infinitely far away, and I could see all of these details up close and personal. So here was this meadow of flowers, and I kept looking at these purple flowers. I looked a little farther, and I saw grove upon grove of massive trees. And the only way I can describe them in a way that's understandable is to say, picture a grove of aspen trees, because their leaves were quaking like this. And so I thought of quaking aspens. And I realized the leaves, and I could see every leaf on every tree in this infinite grove of trees, every leaf on every tree and every vein on every leaf on every tree. It was just marvelous. And I'm watching the leaves quake and I'm watching the flowers sway, and I realized the grass is singing. The grass was singing the praises of God. It was the most beautiful, beautiful sound. And the trees and the flowers were moving in time to the singing of the grass. I was just enthralled. I could not look away. And as I looked, I saw a path kind of open up through this meadow, and it went up a hill. And at the top of the hill, I could see people coming towards me, and they too were singing the praises of God. They were singing the same song the grass was singing. But I couldn't see their faces yet. I couldn't see them clearly. And just as I was looking at these people coming, Jesus was there. And when I was with God, I was with Jesus also. That's something it's really hard to explain. Jesus and God are the same. Sometimes I'll call Jesus God, or God, it's the same thing, but they're different. So they're different and the same at the same time. But Jesus was there, and he said, "You didn't die, you have to go back." And I just said, "No, I'm not going back." And I buried my face in God's chest and wrapped my arms around him. I was not going back. Jesus said, "You didn't die, you have to go back." And I said, "No, I'm not going back." So he pulled me off God's lap. He literally grabbed my hand and pulled me off God's lap. And he said, "You didn't die, you have to go back." And I started yelling at him. No, I'm not going back. I'm not going back. I'll feel pain. But he took me back. And he's God. But he did put up with my arguing. And this time, there was no fun trip this time. We were just, bam, I was right above my body with Jesus. And I was like, how am I going to get back in that body? I don't want to get back in that body. I had no clue how I was going to get back in that body. And then Jesus kind of shoved me in from the back. And when he shoved me in from the back, I hit my face. Whatever body he shoved in, whatever spiritual body he shoved in, I hit the inside of my skull. I could see it. And I panicked. I was trapped in my body. I was struggling inside my body. I have never been so terrified in my life and so it was so claustrophobic to be stuck in my body. And suddenly Jesus was in there with me, and he just smoothed my arms into my arms, and he smoothed my legs into my legs, and he made me one person again.
Okay, Heidi, before you go back or go into more of what happened when you came back into your body, I have like so many questions.
Okay.
So, do you mind my asking?
Not at all.
Okay. First of all, okay, this is just it was interesting that you had a born again Christian boyfriend. I think he and his family could have been praying for you to really know Jesus. I mean, you knew him, but you didn't know that you knew him, and so that's just an observation. But I wanted to know, when you saw Jesus, what did he look like?
Well, obviously he looked to me human. I'll start with the superficial. He was dressed in something white, which I didn't really pay that much attention to. He was barefoot. And I noticed he was barefoot because when we were surfing, I looked down because the light was tickling the bottoms of my feet. We were both barefoot, so I noticed that. And he had long feet and long toes, long, thin feet and long toes. I noticed that. And I have thin feet and long toes. So I noticed that. Um, he looked to be a man in his early 30s. He had kind of a chestnut brown, wavy hair about the same length as mine, with some lighter streaks. He had kind of a strong brow line. He had a beautiful smile, straight white teeth, long fingers. He had really nice shaped hands and long fingers. No, did I see his wrists or his ankles? No, I didn't see that. His whatever he was wearing covered that. Um, High cheekbones, and the interesting thing, there were two interesting things, and I have always said this. I have always said it looked to me like his nose had been broken, and at the time when I was with him, I didn't know much about him. I knew he'd been crucified. I didn't know he'd been beaten before he was crucified. Nor did I know he had brothers or family, or I didn't really know anything about his history. And I just thought, I wonder who broke his nose. Somebody must have broken his nose at some point. Maybe one of his brothers punched him in the nose. I didn't know, but I noticed that his nose was crooked right here, um, which is cartilage. That's like a broken nose. And the interesting thing to me was that he had the most beautiful blue eyes. His eyes were just this sparkling blue. They radiated joy. I couldn't look away from his eyes. They were so filled with joy and happiness and everything in this world, everything in this universe that is good. That was Jesus. And it hit me then that he is the most human being in the world, in the universe. He's what we all should be. He's so human. He's so perfectly human. And even with the fact that I saw a broken nose, it didn't change the fact that I knew he was perfect. It simply didn't change that at all. To me, that added to his perfection. Somehow it just made him seem even more human. He was, as a teenager, I thought, oh, he's really handsome. That's what I thought as a teenager. I thought he was really handsome. And all I can say is, even if I hadn't thought he was handsome, what was coming from his eyes was so beautiful and so loving and so joyous that you just never wanted to be away. You never wanted to leave his presence. It was just perfect. Perfect. That's all I can say.
Now, when you heard singing, with the grass, with the flowers, with the trees, with the people, and the hearing worship, everything worshiping, could you make out any words that they were singing?
I could when I was there, but I can't tell you what they were now. The, when I was dead, everything made sense to me. I could understand what was going on. Every single thing, all my questions were answered, all my existential dilemmas were solved. But when I came back, I could only remember some things. I could not bring back everything I saw or was told. I couldn't. It was kind of like your brain can't contain all of that. And I don't think we're supposed to contain all of that. I think we're supposed to live our lives here and learn what we can about God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit. But I don't think we're supposed to know all that stuff we know when we're dead. I really don't. I think that's not a good thing. So, yes, they were singing with words. What those words were, I cannot remember, but it was the most beautiful music. It's most beautiful. You can't imagine the harmony, how an infinite meadow of grass all in singing in harmony. It was just beyond belief. It was so overwhelmingly beautiful.
Okay, now I'm going to ask another musical question because I'm a music composer, so I'm interested in this. Okay, so could you hear instruments or was it just harmonies of singing?
It seemed to me to be harmonies of singing. And you know how if you have a really amazing a cappella group, it was kind of like that, but way better. But it was because the grass, the voices of the grass, the music sounded like it could sound like instruments and voices. So it was like an a cappella group that is so incredible. You just don't want to stop listening to them. That's what it was kind of like.
Now, when you saw the colors, I have talked to other people who have seen heaven, and so many of them say, and I know that you were, like, they'll say that they couldn't even describe, like, they would say it was a green, or it was a blue, but it was beyond anything of colors I see here. And I know probably, I mean, is that what you experienced too? It's like, well, is that even a real blue? Like, did you see colors that you've never seen before?
Well, what I saw was I saw intense colors. So it wasn't colors I had never seen before. It was colors that were so intense that they were the real color. What I saw were the real colors. What I see here on earth, even on the most beautiful day, is a reflection of that color. It's not up in heaven, you see the true colors, you see the real living colors. Here, I really appreciate, I love nature. I love the grass here. I love all the colors here, but it's still a reflection of what there is in heaven. So it's not the same thing. If you're asking if I saw things from a different color spectrum, I did not. I just saw this really intense living color, and I did see things of all different colors. So I would say it was the intensity of the colors, the and the different shading things we don't have that here. We have color. We have the same colors, but they're almost like a pale reflection of what you see in heaven.
Wow.
And the colors there are alive. They're the light of God flows through all of those things. It's the light of God reflected in all those colors, all those trees, all those flowers. It's alive. The grass is alive. The trees are alive. And yes, things are alive here, but there they were alive, alive. So that's what I saw.
And when you saw people, do you remember anything specific? Like, did they all look one age? Did they look all different ages? Do you remember
I
that?
remember they were, I couldn't tell their ages, but I saw some men, some women, and they were coming together in a group singing. And some of them had their hands raised, some of them were reaching towards me. Um, there was nothing frightening or scary or anything. I just knew that I knew these people, but I didn't know who they were yet. But I knew that somehow I knew them and they knew me. Who they were, I don't know, but I recognized them.
Okay, now anything else that you saw in did you ever see any animals?
I didn't see any animals. However, I got the sense that this is hard to explain. I got the sense that had I looked further, I would have seen birds. I just had the sense that I would have seen birds. and I can't explain it. And I've since learned that birds do get mentioned in the Bible. I hadn't read the Bible before this all happened. I'd read portions of it, but I just got the sense that God, well, number one, I got the sense that God loves children more than, I mean, children are really special to God. He loves all of us, but children are really special to God. I got that sense. And I got the sense that God loves birds. Don't ask me why I got that sense. And I haven't actually really talked about that, but I'm quite convinced that there will be animals in heaven. And I just came back with that sense. But I didn't, it's not like I saw running horses or dog. I didn't see a dog that had died, one of my dogs, but I just got the sense that God loves his creation and he's not going to leave stuff behind. So that was the sense I got. I
Okay.
can't be
Yeah.
clear any more clear than that. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no. And I've talked with other people who have seen actually their pets in heaven, and that's a whole nother story. But
Hmm.
okay, now you are back in your body, and Jesus smoothed you out into your
Yeah.
body. And were you in pain then at that point?
I was in shock. I Jesus did say something to me before he left. He said, "Your life is in good hands." That was the last thing he said to me before he left, which took me a while to figure out because I'm struggling to kind of figure out how to open an eye and how to breathe. And I thought the first thing I thought was, "Why me? What makes me so special? Why isn't everyone in good hands?" And then I realized that was not what he was saying. What he was saying was good, bad, and different. I'm always here. Your life is in good hands. I will always be with you. I realized that was what he was saying. But what I tried to do so hard was open an eye. And I finally managed to crack one eye open, and there was Charlie, the ranch owner, kneeling beside me, crying and praying. And I managed to just croak out his name. And he just said, "Thank God, thank God." And he had jumped on my horse and ridden out to find me. So he did what probably he shouldn't have done, which was put me back over my horse and ride down to my car. Um, and and he put me in the back seat, put my sisters in the car, and drove me home. He carried me up to my bedroom, and then my mother took him home and left me in the care of my 11-year-old sister. And I was in pretty bad shape. I was really shocky. I couldn't feel anything from the waist down. I couldn't walk. My back hurt. I was in a lot of pain. And it wasn't until the next morning, and I know this is going to sound really strange, but this was my family. It wasn't until the next morning when my mother had driven my sisters to school that she realized I couldn't walk. And I, she managed, I had to crawl downstairs using on my elbows and crawl out to the car using my arms, haul myself into the back seat of the car. We got to a clinic. The doctor there took x-rays and said, "Mother, she's going directly to the hospital." And then he said to me, "You will lie flat on your back and you will not move for 30 days. So he called an ambulance, and I was taken to the hospital. I unfortunately did not receive the best care, but I healed. And all I can say is I was pretty seriously injured. I had a lot of broken bones. I had a broken back, broken pelvis, crushed chest, and I healed. And I give all credit to God because I I didn't have physical therapy. I didn't have a neurologist or a neurosurgeon. The doctor my mother took me to was my grandmother's doctor, my grandmother's general practitioner. I didn't have a pediatrician. My pediatrician had died when I was 12. So I was laid up for a long time. I was in the hospital for a month. I was home for a few months and started school on crutches in the fall. And I ended up, I made a plan. I mean, everything that had happened in my life up to that point kind of turned around. I was a different person. I came back a different person. And I had a lot of time in the hospital to come to terms with God, Jesus, and what had happened. And that was not easy. And I made the decision to, I had enough credits to graduate from high school a year early and go to Israel. I felt like, first of all, I'm Jewish, and I suddenly wanted to go to Israel, but I also wanted to walk where Jesus had walked. I wanted to be where he had been and the places he had been, because I figured that's as close as I'm going to get to him in this life. Again, that's as physically close as I will come to him in this life. So I did go to Israel. I lived there for a year in the southern Galilee, south of the Sea of Galilee. I traveled all over. I loved it. Love it. I've been back. I have friends there. I have family there. And it's just a really special place for me. But yes, it did change my life. Did I immediately declare myself a Christian? No, I wasn't quite sure what I was. I'm still Jewish. I did ask my parents if I could go to church. They said no. I said, okay, that's fine. And I was on crutches. I couldn't drive myself anyway. But I just didn't care because I knew God was with me. So I have just been what I am for many, many years. And it wasn't until I moved to Montana that I found a church. I actually kind of go to two churches and an Orthodox synagogue. And I feel I found a home. And it's easier now than it was being Jewish and trying to go to a church back in Iowa. It wasn't quite the same. This is really easy, really feels right. And I did get baptized up here. So it's just, but it took me a while because I actually felt like, okay, if I get baptized, I'm not going to have a relationship with my parents. And I wanted to continue that relationship no matter how difficult, which it was quite difficult. But I did decide to get baptized here. And that's, I mean, I don't know what else to say except that, yeah, God was always with me. I just kind of did my own thing, and I didn't understand until later in life how important a Christian community is. I didn't get that. I've always been kind of a loner. I've been very independent, and I didn't understand the benefits and the joy and the glory and the power in community. I do now. It's quite remarkable to be part of a couple different church communities. So,
I totally understand. And now I want. What did your parents think when you told them that
oh,
you saw Jesus, or your sisters? What did everybody think?
my sisters believed me because they had seen me die. And I told my little sister as soon as I told her that very day, but I really couldn't talk about it. I was so shocky. I was in such bad shape. But I told her everything that happened that day, and she believed me. I told my other sister. My parents, when my mom took me to the hospital, my parents did not come see me till the following night. So I had already been in the hospital for over 24 hours when they came. And I told them what had happened. My father simply, he just turned pale and walked out of the room. And he did not come to visit me the entire time I was in the hospital after that. My mother said, she patted me on the shoulder and she said, oh, honey, we imagine lots of things when we're unconscious. And I said, I wasn't unconscious, I was dead. And it was the most real thing that's ever happened to me. So the next thing my parents did was call a psychiatrist to come speak with me. I told him what happened, and that didn't go well. It wasn't bad, but he didn't believe me, and we didn't really discuss it. Then they called a rabbi. This was a rabbi from the Reform Temple my parents had joined several years before. He was an atheist like my father. And he came to talk to me about it, and he said, you had an hallucination. And I said, I didn't have a hallucination. I saw God. I saw Jesus. I saw God. I sat on God's lap. I saw heaven. And he also just turned and left the room. So the only person I really had to talk to about it, a nurse had heard me discussing this with the rabbi, and she came in and talked to me about it. And she told some other staff members. And this was a Catholic hospital, and the priest who was kind of the resident priest for the hospital used to come in every day and sit and talk with me about it. He was really interested in what I had to say. So we would chat about my experience and what different things may have meant. He was fascinated by what Jesus looked like. He kept wanting me to describe Jesus over and over again. But that was as much exposure as I had. My parents would never talk about it after that. They didn't want to talk about it when I was a teenager. They didn't want to talk about it when I was an adult. It wasn't until, well, my mother would, she knew what had happened. And as she got older and she began to suffer, she suffered from dementia ultimately. She would ask me, now, didn't you have a bad accident? It was always what she would, this was always her intro. Didn't you have a horseback riding accident? Didn't Charlie find you? And then she would want to hear about the story. And she would say, I'm really glad Jesus was there for you.
Wow.
My dad did not want to talk about it ever. But when my father was dying, my father was sharp as a tack till he died. My father really struggled, and he struggled secretly. He was asking Christians to pray for him. And I knew in the end, I was with him when he died, and we had the most amazing connection. And I knew he was struggling between heaven and hell, between Jesus and other place. And I knew in the end, he chose Jesus. He chose the right place. He chose the right person. And it was the first time, I mean, our lives were so difficult and so complex, and he suffered so much, and our relationship suffered. And in the very end, he wasn't suffering. He was at peace. He made the right choice. Do I think that doesn't mean he and Jesus didn't have a little life review and go through a lot of stuff? No, I'm sure they did. But he made the right choice. And I felt both. I mourned him, and I was so happy for him, both at the same time. My mom, same thing. She, at the end of her life, she had a health crisis, and we knew she was going to die. And this woman had been suffering from dementia in the 6 months before she died were really terrible, really awful. The dementia was so severe, but she had 48 hours, not quite 48 hours, of being completely restored to herself. She was herself, and we could talk about everything. And the day she slipped into a coma, my husband and my daughter, who lives here in Montana, and I went to visit her. And as we were leaving, she said, "You go have fun. You should have fun. I never had fun in my entire life." And then she said her final words, "Life was meant to be fun." And she slipped into a coma. She was comfortable. She slept for 10 days with her hands like this. Once in a while, she'd reach up and scratch her nose and put her hands back. And she passed away. And I actually had a dream that I was in her room, and she was there dancing and laughing, and there was music, and all of the people she loved were there. So many people. I didn't even recognize a lot of these people who were there. And I'd never seen my mother dance in her entire life. And she was having so much fun. And suddenly the wall to the room disappeared. And there was a train right outside this memory care facility. She got on the train with everyone, and she waved once, and she was gone. And I knew she had died. And I was awakened from this dream by a call from the facility that she had just passed away. So that was really a gift from God. So my mom did good.
And it's so miraculous what happened to your parents, because they absolutely did not believe in God, and then they had this supernatural encounter. And it was amazing how your mom all of a sudden wanted to talk about Jesus in her last days with you. It was, I mean, I think other people too, and you, the prayers are so powerful. And then I think of Hebrews 7:25. Therefore, he is also able to save to the uttermost those who come to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. I mean, he loves us and he wants us to come to him. Now, have you had any other supernatural encounters? Like, did you see Jesus after that whole experience?
Well, I yes and no. Yes, but I didn't expect to see him, but I did see him once when I was younger. But the one supernatural encounter I had with my mom was when my mother, I had had I had influenza just before my mother had this health crisis. I came down with influenza, and 2 days into my course of influenza, I got a call from the facility that she was having trouble breathing. They sent her to the hospital, and I couldn't go to the hospital and pick her up. So they arranged to pick her up and bring her back to the facility. And she had so many things wrong with her at that moment that any one of them could have killed her. But I did sneak into the facility through the back door. I didn't want to infect anyone else. And I walked into my mom's room. They'd left her sitting in her wheelchair, and there I saw angels. Now, when I died, I did not see angels. If I saw angels, I don't remember seeing angels, but I saw these angels surrounding my mother, these tall, beautiful angels with golden light flowing down them like water, just flowing off them like water. And I knew those angels weren't my angels, they were my mom's angels. And I just stopped. I didn't know what to do. And she said, "Oh, Heidi, I'm so glad you're here." And then I knew I could come into her room. And the whole time I was there sitting with her and we were talking about everything, the angels were there in her presence. And they were her angels. These were not my angels, they were her angels. And, as a hospice nurse, I saw lots of things. I saw lots of really interesting things. And I would say, we never know what's happening when someone's dying. I didn't ask for anyone's religious background unless they told me. I didn't pray with them unless they asked me for prayers or their family asked me for prayers. I prayed for them quietly or privately. But we never know what's happening in somebody's soul as they're dying. We don't know. And I know God is with people until the very last instance. I know he is. He wants them. He's running after them. He's chasing them. He's waiting for them. So I always hoped for the best. We can't make a choice for other people. We have free will. We make our own choices. But I saw so many people who you would never expect to have a peaceful death. I saw so many people who had lived a very difficult life, who had maybe not been the nicest people, have the most beautiful death. And I knew God was there. I felt God's presence. I had some patients who I kind of felt I kind of felt the opposite situation, which was really difficult. And the most you can do is pray. So I think we have to be really careful about judging. I think there was one man I met, Dean Braxton, who I met through John Burke, who wrote.
Yes, and
Yeah.
and I've had Dean on my program.
So Dean mentioned to me, we had dinner together, and he mentioned to me, "I saw someone in heaven I never expected to see there." And it made me laugh because this is up to God and that person. This is not up to us. We don't make the choice. They make the choice with God. I just have always said, God makes it all right. He does. He's waiting for every single one of us. Yes, we make the choice, but he is always there waiting for us until the very last minutest second. So I just have faith that God will work stuff out, that he's going to, like he said to me, your life is in good hands. He's waiting for us. That's all I know.
And I think also it's like Never give up. Never give up
Never
on
give up.
praying for your family, your friends. Just never give up. Now, I just want to ask you this. When you started reading the New Testament, what did you think?
Oh, I thought this is a totally Jewish book from start to finish. And it hit me that how can anyone who's not Jewish even understand this book? It wouldn't even make sense. It's so Jewish. It, it, because if you look at the scriptures they had before the New Testament was written, they were referring back to the Hebrew scriptures, the Torah, the prophets, the writings. They were referring back to all of that. That was their scripture. And when I read the New Testament, I'm like, okay, this picks up where the Hebrew scriptures leave off. And it was so Jewish. It is so Jewish. That's just what hit me. And I don't know, just that it totally resonated with me as a Jewish person that this is my scripture too. And this is my holy book too. And this is the word of God for me too. But I had been told, don't read it. Don't read that book. That's a bad book. So it really hit me. This is a Jewish book, and I wish more Jewish people would read it because most of us think it's a book about how much we should hate Jews or how like a book superimposed on Christians decades or centuries later. No, it's not. It's just picks right up where the Hebrew scriptures leave off. And it's very, very Jewish.
I would say absolutely amen to that. Any last thought?
I would say the one thing that Jesus gave me was hope. I was hopeless before I met him. And so there's always hope. When I look at things in the world, I'm still hopeful. It doesn't, I figure I'm going to trust in God. I'm going to trust in his plan. I'm going to trust in his son. I'm going to trust in his Holy Spirit. I see hope where other people might see darkness. And I think that's what Jesus provides. He provides hope for all of us. And he's so relatable. God's relatable too, but it's in a different way. Jesus is so like us. He lived like us. He knows what we go through. He's so relatable and he knows what you're experiencing. He knows how you feel. So trust in that. Have faith in that. Hold on to that.
That's very, very powerful. Heidi, thank you so much. I already know so many lives are going to be changed. And in the comments, please, I would love to hear from you all who are listening, and please share this with others because we want to see lives changed. Thank you for watching. Dean's heart stopped beating and he was shocked by who he saw in heaven. Click the video to watch now.